Question 1. The efficiency study reveals a potential bottleneck in the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV, driver licensing process for out-of-state transfers. To address this, a proposal suggests expediting the process by accepting all documentation from the applicant's previous state at face value, assuming their licensing standards are equivalent to Virginia's, and significantly reducing the need for independent verification of their driving knowledge or vision standards, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and professional responsibilities of the Virginia DMV. Option A. Expedite the process by accepting all documentation from the applicant's previous state at face value, assuming their licensing standards are equivalent to Virginia's, and significantly reducing the need for independent verification of their driving knowledge or vision standards. Option B. Implement a new, faster system based on assumptions about the equivalency of other states' licensing standards without formal consultation with the Virginia DMV legal counsel or a comprehensive review of relevant Virginia statutes. Option C. Prioritize speed of service above all else, potentially leading to the omission of certain verification steps for out-of-state applicants, such as a secondary identity check or a review of their driving record history beyond what is immediately presented. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the existing Virginia DMV procedures for out-of-state license transfers against the current Virginia Code and DMV regulations, verifying that all required documentation is consistently collected and cross-referenced, and ensuring that vision, knowledge, and road tests are administered or waived according to Virginia's specific criteria. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the existing Virginia DMV procedures for out-of-state license transfers against the current Virginia Code and DMV regulations, verifying that all required documentation is consistently collected and cross-referenced, and ensuring that vision, knowledge, and road tests are administered or waived according to Virginia's specific criteria. Explanation: the efficiency study reveals a potential bottleneck in the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV, driver licensing process, specifically concerning the handling of out-of-state transfers. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient processing with the absolute imperative of ensuring compliance with Virginia's specific licensing laws and regulations, as well as maintaining public trust. A rushed or incomplete process could lead to unqualified individuals obtaining Virginia licenses, posing a safety risk, and could result in significant legal and reputational damage to the DMV. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement improvements that are both effective and legally sound. The approach that represents best professional practice involves a thorough review of the existing Virginia DMV procedures for out-of-state license transfers against the current Virginia Code and DMV regulations. This includes verifying that all required documentation is consistently collected and cross-referenced, ensuring that vision, knowledge, and road tests are administered or waived according to Virginia's specific criteria, and confirming that the applicant's identity and residency are adequately established under Virginia law. This approach is correct because it prioritizes strict adherence to the established legal framework governing driver licensing in Virginia, as mandated by the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles and the Virginia Code. It ensures that every applicant meets the state's minimum requirements for safe operation of a motor vehicle, thereby upholding public safety and legal integrity. An incorrect approach would be to streamline the process by relying solely on the applicant's previous state's documentation, without independent verification against Virginia's specific requirements. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the legal obligation to ensure that all drivers licensed in Virginia meet the state's unique standards for vision, knowledge, and practical driving skills, as outlined in the Virginia Code. Such an approach risks issuing licenses to individuals who may not be qualified to drive in Virginia, violating regulatory mandates. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a new, faster system based on assumptions about the equivalency of other states' licensing standards, without formal consultation with the Virginia DMV legal counsel or a comprehensive review of relevant Virginia statutes. This is professionally unacceptable, as it demonstrates a disregard for the established regulatory process and the potential for unintended legal consequences. Decisions regarding licensing procedures must be grounded in the specific laws and regulations of Virginia, not on assumptions or generalized best practices that may not align with the state's legal requirements. A further incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of service above all else, potentially leading to the omission of certain verification steps for out-of-state applicants, such as a secondary identity check or a review of their driving record history beyond what is immediately presented. This is professionally unacceptable because it directly compromises the integrity of the licensing process and violates the DMV's duty to ensure that all licensed drivers are properly vetted according to Virginia's laws. The professional reasoning framework for such situations involves a systematic evaluation of proposed changes against the specific legal and regulatory requirements of Virginia, prioritizing public safety and legal compliance. Any proposed efficiency improvements must be vetted through a process that includes legal review, impact assessment on compliance, and consideration of potential risks to public safety, ensuring that the pursuit of efficiency does not undermine the core mission of the Virginia DMV. Question 2. Quality control measures reveal that a Virginia DMV licensing agent, when processing an application for a learner's permit, considered accepting a parent's handwritten note as proof of residency and suggested waiving the knowledge test for an applicant who claimed extensive international driving experience, and also considered issuing the permit based solely on the applicant's assertion of having a valid foreign license without verification. Which of these actions, if taken, would represent the most significant deviation from the requirements of the Virginia Motor Vehicle Operators License Act? Option A. Accepting a parent's handwritten note as sufficient proof of residency for the learner's permit application. Option B. Waiving the knowledge test for an applicant based on their claim of extensive international driving experience. Option C. Strictly adhering to the Virginia Motor Vehicle Operators License Act by requiring official documentation for residency and administering the knowledge test. Option D. Issuing a learner's permit based solely on the applicant's assertion of possessing a valid foreign driver's license without verification. The correct answer is C. Strictly adhering to the Virginia Motor Vehicle Operators License Act by requiring official documentation for residency and administering the knowledge test. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal and safety requirements mandated by Virginia law. The applicant's situation, while potentially sympathetic, cannot override the established procedures designed to ensure public safety on Virginia roadways. The challenge lies in adhering strictly to the Virginia Motor Vehicle Operators License Act and its associated regulations, even when faced with a compelling personal circumstance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the requirements outlined in the Virginia Motor Vehicle Operators License Act for obtaining a learner's permit. This includes ensuring the applicant meets all age, residency, and documentation requirements, and successfully passing the required knowledge and vision tests. The Virginia DMV's procedures are designed to verify an individual's understanding of traffic laws and their ability to operate a vehicle safely before granting them the privilege of driving. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legislative intent of the Virginia Motor Vehicle Operators License Act, which prioritizes public safety by establishing a standardized and verifiable process for licensing drivers. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves accepting a handwritten note from a parent as proof of residency for the purpose of issuing a learner's permit. This fails to comply with the specific documentation requirements stipulated by the Virginia DMV, which typically mandate official documents like utility bills or lease agreements. This bypasses the established verification process, potentially allowing individuals who do not meet residency requirements to obtain a license, thereby undermining the integrity of the licensing system and potentially compromising safety. Another incorrect approach is to waive the knowledge test because the applicant claims to have extensive experience driving in another country. While international driving experience is valuable, the Virginia Motor Vehicle Operators License Act requires all applicants to demonstrate proficiency in Virginia's specific traffic laws and regulations by passing the knowledge test. Exempting an applicant from this test without proper authorization or a reciprocal agreement between Virginia and the applicant's country of origin is a violation of the Act and poses a safety risk by assuming knowledge of local laws. A further incorrect approach is to issue a learner's permit based solely on the applicant's assertion that they have a valid driver's license from their home country, without verifying its authenticity or ensuring it meets Virginia's requirements for reciprocity or transfer. The Virginia DMV has specific procedures for evaluating foreign licenses. Failing to follow these procedures can lead to individuals driving in Virginia without adequate knowledge of local laws or without having met the state's safety standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety above all else. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding and applying the specific regulations of the Virginia Motor Vehicle Operators License Act and associated DMV policies. 2. Recognizing that personal circumstances, while important, do not supersede legal requirements. 3. Employing a systematic approach to verifying all required documentation and testing, ensuring each step of the licensing process is completed according to established protocols. 4. Seeking clarification from supervisors or legal counsel if any aspect of the process is unclear or presents an unusual circumstance, rather than making ad hoc decisions. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates that a 15-year-old applicant in Virginia has presented a completed application for a learner's permit, along with parental consent. However, the applicant states they have not yet begun their mandatory driver education program but plan to start it next month. Based on Virginia DMV regulations, what is the correct course of action for the licensing official? Option A. Issue the learner's permit with a notation that driver education must be completed within a specified time frame, allowing supervised driving in the interim. Option B. Inform the applicant that they must successfully complete a state-approved driver education program before a learner's permit can be issued, and explain the subsequent steps required for obtaining a provisional driver's license. Option C. Allow the applicant to proceed with supervised driving immediately, with the understanding that they will complete their driver education program at a later date, as they are under 18. Option D. Advise the applicant to wait until they turn 16 to apply for a provisional driver's license, as this is the age when they can legally drive with a permit. The correct answer is B. Inform the applicant that they must successfully complete a state-approved driver education program before a learner's permit can be issued, and explain the subsequent steps required for obtaining a provisional driver's license. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for transportation with the legal and safety requirements mandated by the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV. A driver's license is a privilege, and its issuance is contingent upon meeting specific criteria designed to ensure public safety on Virginia roadways. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the nuances of Virginia's licensing laws and applying them correctly to a situation involving a minor who has not yet met all prerequisites. The best professional approach involves adhering strictly to the Virginia DMV's established procedures for obtaining a learner's permit and subsequently a driver's license. This means ensuring the applicant, in this case, a 15-year-old, has completed the mandatory driver education program, passed the required knowledge and vision tests, and has the necessary parental consent. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with Virginia Code Section 46(2)-334, which outlines the requirements for a learner's permit for individuals under 18, including the completion of a state-approved driver education program and parental authorization. It prioritizes legal compliance and the safety of both the applicant and the public by ensuring the applicant possesses foundational knowledge and skills before operating a vehicle, even with supervision. An incorrect approach would be to issue a learner's permit without confirmation of the driver education completion. This fails to meet the explicit statutory requirements of Virginia Code Section 46(2)-334(a)(1), which mandates that the applicant must have successfully completed a state-approved driver education program. Ethically, this bypasses a crucial safety step designed to equip new drivers with essential knowledge and skills, potentially endangering the applicant and others. Another incorrect approach would be to allow the 15-year-old to drive unsupervised with the understanding that they will complete driver education later. This directly violates Virginia Code Section 46. 2-335, which specifies that a learner's permit holder must be accompanied by a licensed driver at least 21 years of age when operating a motor vehicle. It also circumvents the purpose of the learner's permit, which is to allow supervised practice after demonstrating basic knowledge and completing initial training. Finally, suggesting the applicant wait until they are 16 to obtain a license, without mentioning the learner's permit process and its prerequisites, is also an incomplete and potentially misleading approach. While 16 is the age for a provisional driver's license, the path to it for a minor involves the learner's permit stage, which has its own set of requirements that must be met first. This fails to guide the applicant through the correct, legally defined process in Virginia. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and applying the specific regulations of the Virginia DMV. This involves consulting the relevant sections of the Virginia Code and DMV guidelines, verifying all required documentation and completed steps, and clearly communicating the legal requirements and the correct procedural path to the applicant and their guardians. The focus should always be on ensuring compliance with the law and promoting safe driving practices. Question 4. System analysis indicates that while driving in Richmond, Virginia, you approach an intersection controlled by traffic signals. You intend to turn left. An oncoming vehicle, also approaching the intersection, has already entered it and has signaled its intention to turn left as well, crossing your intended path. What is the legally and ethically correct approach to navigate this situation? Option A. Proceed into the intersection, assuming the oncoming vehicle will wait for you to complete your turn. Option B. Stop and wait for the oncoming vehicle to back out of the intersection to allow you to proceed. Option C. Attempt to proceed simultaneously with the oncoming vehicle, trusting they will adjust their maneuver. Option D. Yield to the oncoming vehicle that has already entered the intersection and signaled its intent to turn left. The correct answer is D. Yield to the oncoming vehicle that has already entered the intersection and signaled its intent to turn left. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a driver to make a critical decision under pressure, potentially impacting their safety and the safety of others, while also adhering to specific Virginia traffic laws. The driver must accurately recall and apply knowledge of right-of-way rules in a complex, dynamic situation. The challenge lies in interpreting the actions of other road users and applying the correct legal principle to determine who has the right to proceed. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves yielding the right-of-way to the oncoming vehicle that is already within the intersection and has signaled its intent to turn left. This aligns with Virginia's traffic laws, specifically the principle that a driver intending to turn left across the path of oncoming traffic must yield to all vehicles approaching from the opposite direction which are within the intersection or so close as to constitute an immediate hazard. The driver's responsibility is to ensure a safe passage for themselves and others, which necessitates prioritizing the vehicle already committed to its maneuver within the intersection. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding into the intersection before the oncoming vehicle has completed its turn is a regulatory failure. This action directly violates the yielding requirement for left-turning vehicles and creates a hazardous situation, increasing the risk of a collision. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the fundamental right-of-way rules designed to prevent such conflicts. Attempting to proceed simultaneously with the oncoming vehicle, assuming the oncoming driver will yield, is also a regulatory failure and a dangerous assumption. This approach disregards the explicit legal obligation to yield to vehicles already in the intersection or those so close as to pose an immediate hazard. It prioritizes expediency over safety and legal compliance. Assuming the oncoming vehicle will stop or back up to allow passage is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. This is an unpredictable and unsafe assumption that directly contradicts the established right-of-way rules. It places an undue burden on other drivers and creates an extremely high risk of an accident. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and legal compliance. This involves 1. Situational awareness, continuously observing and interpreting the actions of all other road users. 2. Legal knowledge application, recalling and applying relevant traffic laws, such as right-of-way rules for intersections. 3. Risk assessment, evaluating the potential consequences of each possible action. 4. Defensive driving, making decisions that minimize risk and anticipate potential hazards, even if it means yielding the right-of-way when technically permissible to proceed. In this case, the safest and most legally sound decision is to yield. Question 5. The efficiency study reveals a recurring pattern among driver trainees in Virginia, where a significant number struggle with correctly applying right-of-way rules at uncontrolled intersections, leading to a higher rate of assessment failures in this specific area. As a driving instructor, what is the most effective and responsible course of action to address this identified deficiency and ensure trainees are prepared for safe driving on Virginia's roads? Option A. Rely on trainees to learn right-of-way rules through incidental exposure during general driving practice, without specific targeted instruction. Option B. Minimize instruction on right-of-way rules at uncontrolled intersections to accelerate the training timeline and improve overall pass rates for the program. Option C. Implement a focused training module specifically on right-of-way rules at uncontrolled intersections, incorporating scenario-based exercises and reviewing relevant sections of the Virginia Driver's Manual. Option D. Increase the overall number of supervised driving hours for all trainees, assuming that broader experience will naturally improve their understanding of all traffic rules. The correct answer is C. Implement a focused training module specifically on right-of-way rules at uncontrolled intersections, incorporating scenario-based exercises and reviewing relevant sections of the Virginia Driver's Manual. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a recurring issue with driver trainees in Virginia exhibiting a pattern of incomplete understanding of right-of-way rules at uncontrolled intersections, leading to a higher-than-average rate of minor collisions during their practical assessments. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driving instructor to balance the immediate need to pass trainees with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety on Virginia's roadways. A failure to adequately address this specific knowledge gap could result in licensed drivers posing a risk to themselves and others. The best approach involves a targeted intervention that directly addresses the identified deficiency. This means dedicating specific training modules and practice sessions to uncontrolled intersections, utilizing visual aids and scenario-based learning to reinforce the principles of right-of-way as outlined in the Virginia Driver's Manual. This approach is correct because it aligns with the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles (DMV) mandate to produce competent and safe drivers. The Virginia Driver's Manual explicitly details right-of-way rules, and instructors are ethically and regulatorily bound to ensure trainees master these fundamental concepts before licensing. Focusing on the specific area of weakness demonstrates a commitment to thoroughness and safety, directly mitigating the risk identified by the efficiency study. An approach that prioritizes simply increasing the overall number of practice hours, without focusing on the specific deficit in right-of-way knowledge at uncontrolled intersections, is professionally unacceptable. While more practice is generally beneficial, it fails to address the root cause of the problem and may lead to trainees reinforcing incorrect habits. This approach neglects the specific learning needs identified and could result in a false sense of preparedness. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to assume that trainees will naturally grasp these rules through repeated exposure to various driving situations. This passive learning strategy is insufficient for complex or frequently misunderstood rules like right-of-way at uncontrolled intersections. The Virginia DMV expects active instruction and verification of understanding, not mere exposure. Finally, an approach that involves glossing over the right-of-way rules at uncontrolled intersections to expedite the training process and increase pass rates is ethically reprehensible and a direct violation of the instructor's duty of care. This prioritizes expediency over safety and undermines the integrity of the licensing process, potentially leading to dangerous outcomes on Virginia's roads. Professionals should employ a data-driven decision-making process. When an efficiency study or assessment data highlights a specific area of weakness, the professional response must be to analyze the root cause and implement targeted remedial training. This involves reviewing the relevant Virginia DMV regulations and curriculum, developing specific instructional strategies, and rigorously assessing trainee comprehension before proceeding. The ultimate goal is always to ensure the trainee possesses the necessary knowledge and skills to operate a vehicle safely and legally within the Commonwealth of Virginia. Question 6. The efficiency study reveals a potential for streamlining the road test process for new drivers in Virginia. However, A primary concern is ensuring that any adjustments do not compromise the assessment of an applicant's adherence to Virginia's traffic laws and safe driving practices, as outlined in the Virginia Driver's Manual. Which of the following approaches best balances efficiency with the critical mandate of ensuring driver competency and public safety on Virginia's roads? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the current road test evaluation criteria, comparing them against the specific requirements and standards detailed in the Virginia Driver's Manual and relevant sections of the Virginia Code, to identify areas for clearer instruction and more consistent application during testing. Option B. Introduce new, unwritten performance indicators based on examiner intuition to gauge driver readiness, without formal documentation or alignment with existing Virginia traffic regulations. Option C. Implement a blanket reduction in the time allocated for each road test to increase the number of applicants processed daily, assuming that current evaluation criteria are sufficient. Option D. Rely solely on feedback from experienced examiners regarding perceived difficulties in the testing process, without cross-referencing this with objective data on driving errors or accident statistics involving newly licensed drivers in Virginia. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of the current road test evaluation criteria, comparing them against the specific requirements and standards detailed in the Virginia Driver's Manual and relevant sections of the Virginia Code, to identify areas for clearer instruction and more consistent application during testing. Explanation: the efficiency study reveals a potential bottleneck in the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles (DMV) driver licensing process, specifically concerning the interpretation and application of Virginia's traffic laws during the road test portion. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient processing of applicants with the absolute imperative of ensuring public safety on Virginia's roadways. A poorly administered road test can lead to unqualified drivers obtaining licenses, thereby increasing the risk of accidents and violations. Careful judgment is required to implement changes that are both effective and legally compliant with Virginia's code. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of the current road test evaluation criteria against the specific requirements outlined in the Virginia Driver's Manual and relevant sections of the Virginia Code pertaining to traffic control devices, right-of-way, and safe driving practices. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core purpose of the road test, to assess a driver's ability to safely and legally operate a vehicle in Virginia. By aligning the evaluation with established Virginia standards, the DMV ensures that all applicants are judged on the same, legally mandated criteria, promoting fairness and upholding public safety. This directly supports the legislative intent behind driver licensing, which is to ensure a minimum standard of competence for all road users in the Commonwealth. An approach that focuses solely on reducing the average time per test without a corresponding review of the evaluation criteria is professionally unacceptable. This would prioritize speed over safety and legal compliance, potentially leading to a superficial assessment of a driver's skills and knowledge of Virginia traffic laws. Fails to address the root cause of any potential inefficiency, if that inefficiency stems from unclear or inconsistently applied testing standards. Another unacceptable approach would be to introduce new, subjective evaluation elements not explicitly mentioned in the Virginia Driver's Manual or Virginia Code. This introduces an element of arbitrariness into the testing process, making it difficult for applicants to prepare and potentially leading to discriminatory outcomes. It deviates from the established legal framework for driver competency in Virginia. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal feedback from examiners without a structured, data-driven analysis of test results and accident data related to new drivers is also professionally unsound. While examiner feedback is valuable, it needs to be corroborated with objective data to identify systemic issues and ensure that any changes are evidence-based and aligned with Virginia's traffic safety goals. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the problem and its potential impact on public safety and legal compliance within the specific context of Virginia's laws. This involves consulting relevant Virginia statutes and the official Virginia Driver's Manual. Next, they should identify potential solutions, evaluating each against the established legal and safety standards. The preferred solution will be the one that demonstrably improves efficiency while rigorously upholding or enhancing the assessment of a driver's competency according to Virginia's specific requirements. Continuous monitoring and evaluation of the implemented changes are crucial to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance. Question 7. Strategic planning requires a new resident in Virginia to understand the legal framework for operating a motor vehicle. Considering Virginia's specific traffic laws and DMV regulations, what is the most appropriate course of action for an individual who has recently moved to the Commonwealth and intends to drive? Option A. Obtain a Virginia driver's license promptly after establishing residency, adhering to the timeframe specified by the Virginia DMV for new residents. Option B. Rely on a verbal understanding with a friend about the validity of their out-of-state license without consulting official Virginia DMV guidelines. Option C. Continue driving using their out-of-state driver's license indefinitely, assuming it remains valid for an extended period in Virginia. Option D. Drive without a license until they have more time to visit the Virginia DMV, prioritizing immediate transportation needs. The correct answer is A. Obtain a Virginia driver's license promptly after establishing residency, adhering to the timeframe specified by the Virginia DMV for new residents. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for transportation with the legal obligation to possess a valid driver's license. A new resident in Virginia faces a common dilemma: how to legally operate a vehicle while navigating the administrative requirements of the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV. Failure to comply can result in legal penalties, including fines and potential impoundment of the vehicle, and can also create significant personal inconvenience. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Virginia's traffic laws and DMV regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice is to obtain a Virginia driver's license as soon as legally permissible after establishing residency. This approach directly addresses the core requirement of Virginia law, which mandates that any person operating a motor vehicle on the Commonwealth's highways must be licensed by the Virginia DMV. This ensures that the individual has met the state's standards for safe driving and is legally authorized to operate a vehicle. The Virginia Code, specifically sections related to driver licensing and operation of motor vehicles, underpins this requirement. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing to drive with an out-of-state license beyond the permissible grace period, or without any license at all, constitutes a violation of Virginia law. This is because Virginia law specifies a time frame within which new residents must obtain a Virginia driver's license. Driving without a valid Virginia license, or an expired out-of-state license beyond the allowed period, exposes the individual to legal repercussions and demonstrates a disregard for the regulatory framework designed to ensure road safety. Relying on the assumption that an out-of-state license is indefinitely valid in Virginia without verifying the specific grace period is a regulatory failure. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should prioritize understanding and adhering to the specific laws of the jurisdiction they are operating within. This involves proactively researching the requirements of the Virginia DMV regarding new resident licensing, including any applicable grace periods for out-of-state licenses. The decision-making process should involve identifying the legal mandate, understanding the timeline for compliance, and taking the necessary steps to fulfill that mandate before engaging in the regulated activity, driving. Question 8. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need to reinforce understanding of pedestrian right-of-way in Virginia. A driver is approaching a marked crosswalk on a clear day. A pedestrian is standing on the sidewalk, looking to cross, and begins to step off the curb as the vehicle is about 20 feet away. What is the driver's legally required action according to Virginia traffic laws? Option A. Accelerate to pass through the crosswalk before the pedestrian enters it. Option B. Immediately stop the vehicle to allow the pedestrian to cross. Option C. Proceed cautiously, assuming the pedestrian will wait for the vehicle to pass. Option D. Signal the pedestrian to proceed by waving or flashing headlights. The correct answer is B. Immediately stop the vehicle to allow the pedestrian to cross. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to interpret and apply Virginia's traffic laws regarding yielding to pedestrians in a dynamic, real-world situation. The driver must balance their immediate need to proceed with the absolute legal obligation to ensure pedestrian safety, even when the pedestrian's actions might seem unexpected or inconvenient. Failure to correctly assess and act upon the yielding requirement can lead to accidents, injuries, and legal penalties. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves immediately yielding the right-of-way to the pedestrian. This aligns directly with Virginia Code Section 46, 2-823, which mandates that drivers approaching a crosswalk must yield the right-of-way to any pedestrian lawfully within the crosswalk. Even if the pedestrian is not yet in the direct path of the vehicle, the law's intent is to prevent any potential conflict or hazard. A driver's primary responsibility is to ensure the safety of vulnerable road users, and this includes anticipating potential pedestrian movements and acting defensively. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding cautiously without stopping, assuming the pedestrian will wait, is a regulatory failure. Virginia law does not permit drivers to make assumptions about a pedestrian's intentions when they are lawfully in or approaching a crosswalk. This approach risks a collision and violates the explicit yielding requirement. Attempting to signal the pedestrian to proceed is also an incorrect approach. While seemingly courteous, it usurps the pedestrian's right-of-way and places the onus on them to interpret the driver's signal, which is not legally sanctioned and can lead to confusion and accidents. It also implies the driver believes they have the right to grant or deny passage, which is contrary to the law. Speeding up to pass through the crosswalk before the pedestrian enters, it is a severe regulatory violation and extremely dangerous. This action directly contravenes the yielding requirement and demonstrates a reckless disregard for pedestrian safety, increasing the likelihood of a serious accident. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a defensive driving mindset, prioritizing the safety of others, especially pedestrians. When approaching a crosswalk, drivers must actively look for pedestrians and be prepared to stop. The legal framework in Virginia, as outlined in Section 46, 2-823, provides clear guidance. Yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk. This means stopping if necessary, even if it causes a slight delay. The decision-making process should always err on the side of caution and compliance with traffic laws designed to protect vulnerable road users. Question 9. Strategic planning requires a new resident in Virginia to obtain a driver's license. Which approach best ensures compliance with Virginia DMV requirements for the knowledge test? Option A. Relying on informal online quizzes and study materials found on various websites. Option B. Thoroughly studying the official Virginia Driver's Manual provided by the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles. Option C. Memorizing information shared by friends or family members who recently passed the test. Option D. Cramming key facts and rules the night before the scheduled knowledge test. The correct answer is B. Thoroughly studying the official Virginia Driver's Manual provided by the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal and safety requirements mandated by the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV. A new resident must demonstrate their understanding of Virginia's traffic laws and safe driving practices to obtain a license. Failure to comply with these regulations can lead to penalties for the individual and potential liability for the licensing authority if procedures are not followed correctly. Careful judgment is required to ensure all necessary steps are taken accurately and efficiently. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the applicant diligently studying the official Virginia Driver's Manual provided by the Virginia DMV. This manual contains all the information necessary to pass the knowledge test, covering traffic laws, road signs, and safe driving techniques specific to Virginia. Adhering to this approach ensures the applicant is preparing using the authoritative and legally recognized source of information, directly aligning with the requirements for obtaining a Virginia driver's license. This is the most direct and compliant method to meet the DMV's educational prerequisites. Incorrect approaches analysis. Relying solely on informal online quizzes or outdated study guides from unofficial sources presents a significant regulatory failure. These materials may not accurately reflect current Virginia traffic laws or DMV testing standards, leading to misinformation and potential failure of the knowledge test. Furthermore, using information from friends or family who have recently obtained licenses, while well-intentioned, is also problematic. Their understanding might be incomplete or based on personal interpretation rather than the official curriculum, creating a risk of learning incorrect information. Attempting to cram the night before the test without prior study demonstrates a lack of commitment to understanding the material and increases the likelihood of errors due to insufficient preparation, which is contrary to the spirit of ensuring competent drivers on Virginia's roads. Professional reasoning. Professionals in licensing or educational roles should always guide individuals towards official, authoritative sources of information. When dealing with licensing requirements, the primary focus must be on compliance with the specific regulations of the governing body, in this case, the Virginia DMV. Decision-making should prioritize accuracy, completeness, and adherence to established procedures. This involves verifying that all preparatory materials are current and directly sourced from the relevant authority. Question 10. The risk matrix shows a 65-year-old driver in Virginia who has recently been diagnosed with a progressive neurological condition that can cause intermittent episodes of impaired motor control and cognitive function. The driver reports feeling mostly fine and believes they can still drive safely. The Virginia DMV requires a review of their driving privileges. If the driver's physician estimates a 15% chance of experiencing a significant impairment episode within the next 6 months while driving, and the DMV's internal risk assessment model assigns a severity score of 8 out of 10 for such an episode, what is the calculated risk score for this driver, assuming the DMV uses a simple multiplicative model for risk assessment? Risk score equals probability of impairment x severity score. Option A 0, 15, option B 1, 2, option C 8, option D 0, 85. The correct answer is B, 1, 2. Question 11. Market research demonstrates that many new drivers in Virginia are anxious about their upcoming road skills test. A driving instructor is preparing a student who has expressed significant worry about parallel parking and lane changes. The instructor wants to ensure the student passes the Virginia DMV road skills test while also instilling safe driving practices. Which of the following approaches best prepares the student for the test and promotes responsible driving in Virginia? Option A. Spend minimal time on parallel parking and lane changes, suggesting the student can figure it out during the test and focus instead on general driving time. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the Virginia Driver's Manual, focusing on the specific requirements for parallel parking and lane changes as outlined by the Virginia DMV, and provide targeted practice sessions addressing these maneuvers until proficiency is demonstrated according to the official testing criteria. Option C. Prioritize practicing the maneuvers the student feels most confident performing, assuming that a positive experience will build overall confidence for the test. Option D. Tell the student that parallel parking and lane changes are minor parts of the test and not to worry about them, encouraging them to focus on simply getting from point A to point B. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the Virginia Driver's Manual, focusing on the specific requirements for parallel parking and lane changes as outlined by the Virginia DMV, and provide targeted practice sessions addressing these maneuvers until proficiency is demonstrated according to the official testing criteria. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Virginia who is tasked with preparing a student for the road skills test. The challenge lies in balancing the student's eagerness to pass with the absolute necessity of ensuring they possess the fundamental skills and understanding required for safe operation of a vehicle, as mandated by Virginia's driver licensing regulation. A superficial approach risks not only the student's failure, but more importantly, the safety of themselves and others on Virginia roadways. Careful judgment is required to identify and address any deficiencies without discouraging the student. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive review of the Virginia Driver's Manual and a thorough assessment of the student's practical driving skills against the specific criteria outlined for the road skills test. This approach directly aligns with the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV, stated objectives for driver education, which emphasize safe driving habits and adherence to traffic laws. By focusing on the official testing standards and providing targeted practice, the instructor ensures the student is adequately prepared according to the Commonwealth's requirements, thereby maximizing their chances of passing the test while upholding safety standards. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely focusing on the maneuvers the student finds easiest, assuming this will lead to a pass. This fails to address potential weaknesses that are critical for the road skills test and for safe driving in Virginia. It neglects the regulatory requirement for demonstrating proficiency in all tested areas. Another incorrect approach is to rush through the practice sessions, prioritizing speed over thoroughness, with the belief that more practice time equates to better preparation. This overlooks the qualitative aspect of learning and the specific performance indicators Virginia DMV expects, risks the student developing bad habits or not fully understanding the nuances of safe driving. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the student's concerns about specific maneuvers, attributing them to nervousness rather than a genuine need for more instruction. This demonstrates a lack of empathy and a failure to identify and rectify skill gaps, which is contrary to the instructor's duty to ensure the student is competent and safe to drive on Virginia roads. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this situation by first consulting the official Virginia DMV driver education and testing guidelines. They should then conduct an initial assessment to identify the student's strengths and weaknesses relative to these guidelines. Based on this assessment, a personalized training plan should be developed that prioritizes areas needing improvement, using the official testing criteria as the benchmark. Regular feedback and constructive criticism, delivered empathetically, are crucial. The ultimate goal is not just to pass the test, but to cultivate a safe and responsible driver within the legal framework of Virginia. Question 12. Strategic planning requires a DMV employee in Virginia to process a driver's license application. The applicant presents a birth certificate that appears authentic, but is missing one of the required secondary identification documents as specified in the Virginia Driver's Manual. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance? Option A. Lightly inform the applicant that a secondary identification document is missing and explain the specific requirements for acceptable secondary identification according to Virginia DMV regulations, advising them to return with the correct documentation. Option B. Advise the applicant to obtain any other form of identification they might have, even if it is not explicitly listed as an acceptable secondary document in the Virginia Driver's Manual. To expedite the process, Option C. Accept the birth certificate and the applicant's verbal assurance that they are unable to obtain the secondary document at this time, processing the application with a note about the missing item. Option D. Process the application using only the birth certificate, assuming the applicant's identity is sufficiently verified by this primary document alone, given its apparent authenticity. The correct answer is A. Politely inform the applicant that a secondary identification document is missing and explain the specific requirements for acceptable secondary identification according to Virginia DMV regulations, advising them to return with the correct documentation. Explanation. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape to ensure compliance and operational integrity. In Virginia, the Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV, oversees driver licensing and vehicle registration, with specific regulations governing how these services are provided and how customer information is handled. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves balancing the need for efficient service delivery with the strict requirements for verifying applicant identity and eligibility, as mandated by Virginia DMV regulations. Misinterpreting or circumventing these requirements can lead to fraudulent licensing, security risks, and significant penalties for the individual and the organization. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the Virginia DMV's established procedures for verifying applicant identity and documentation. This means meticulously checking all submitted documents against the requirements outlined in the Virginia Driver's Manual and relevant DMV policy directives. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with Virginia's legal framework for issuing driver's licenses, which prioritizes preventing identity fraud and ensuring that only eligible individuals obtain licenses. By following established protocols, the applicant's identity is confirmed through multiple, verifiable means, thereby upholding the integrity of the licensing system and complying with state law. An incorrect approach would be to accept a document that does not fully meet the Virginia DMV's specified criteria for proof of identity, even if it appears legitimate or is presented by a seemingly trustworthy individual. This failure to adhere to the precise documentation requirements constitutes a regulatory violation, bypasses the safeguards designed to prevent fraudulent applications, and could result in the issuance of a license to an unqualified or impersonating individual, undermining public safety and the DMV's regulatory authority. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the applicant's verbal assurance of their identity or the authenticity of their documents without independent verification. Virginia DMV regulations require documentary evidence, not just self-attestation. This approach is flawed because it ignores the explicit legal mandate for verification and opens the door to potential fraud, violating the principle of due diligence required by the state. A further incorrect approach would be to make an exception based on perceived urgency or convenience. Virginia DMV regulations are designed to be applied consistently to all applicants. Deviating from these established procedures, even with good intentions, can create loopholes, lead to inconsistent application of the law, and compromise the overall security and reliability of the driver's licensing system. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes understanding and applying the specific regulations of the Virginia DMV. This involves consulting the official Virginia Driver's Manual and any relevant DMV policy updates when faced with uncertainty. When an applicant's documentation does not precisely match the requirements, the professional should clearly communicate the deficiencies to the applicant and explain the necessary steps to rectify them, rather than attempting to interpret or bend the rules. This ensures both compliance and fair treatment of all applicants. Question 13. Strategic planning requires a driver in Virginia to consider their upcoming vehicle registration renewal. If a driver has initiated the online renewal process for their Virginia vehicle registration and paid the fees, but has not yet received and affixed the new registration sticker to their license plate, what is the most legally compliant and professionally responsible course of action regarding operating the vehicle on public roads? Option A. Drive the vehicle, carrying proof of the online renewal payment and a copy of the renewal confirmation email, as this demonstrates intent to comply with Virginia DMV regulations. Option B. Affix the expired registration sticker to the license plate, as it indicates the renewal process has been started and the vehicle is in the process of being legally registered. Option C. Refrain from driving the vehicle until the new registration sticker is received and properly affixed to the license plate, or obtain a temporary operating permit from the Virginia DMV if legally permissible for such situations. Option D. Drive the vehicle, assuming that law enforcement will exercise discretion given that the renewal process has been initiated and the fees have been paid. The correct answer is C. Refrain from driving the vehicle until the new registration sticker is received and properly affixed to the license plate, or obtain a temporary operating permit from the Virginia DMV if legally permissible for such situations. Explanation. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape to ensure compliance and safe operation. In Virginia, operating a motor vehicle necessitates adherence to specific licensing and vehicle registration requirements as outlined by the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a direct conflict between a driver's personal circumstances and the legal obligations imposed by the state. The driver must make a decision that balances their immediate need for transportation with the imperative to comply with Virginia's traffic laws. Failure to do so can result in penalties, including fines, license suspension, and even criminal charges, impacting their ability to legally drive. The best professional approach involves prioritizing legal compliance and seeking the appropriate channels for resolution. This means understanding that operating a vehicle without a valid registration sticker, even if the renewal process has been initiated, is a violation of Virginia law. Therefore, the correct course of action is to secure the necessary temporary permit or to refrain from driving the vehicle until the official registration sticker is affixed. This approach directly addresses the legal requirement of having a valid registration sticker displayed on the vehicle, as mandated by the Virginia DMV. It demonstrates a commitment to upholding traffic laws and avoiding actions that could jeopardize their driving privileges or lead to legal repercussions. An incorrect approach would be to assume that initiating the renewal process negates the requirement for the physical sticker to be displayed. Virginia law requires the current registration decal to be properly displayed on the vehicle's license plate. Simply having paid for the renewal does not grant permission to operate the vehicle without the visible decal. Another incorrect approach would be to drive the vehicle with an expired registration sticker, believing that the risk of being caught is low. This disregards the law and places the driver at risk of penalties. Finally, attempting to create a facsimile of a registration sticker or using an old sticker would be a fraudulent act, carrying severe legal consequences beyond a simple traffic violation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core legal requirements of the situation. In this case, the requirement is a valid, displayed registration sticker. Next, they should assess the available legal options for compliance, such as obtaining a temporary permit if applicable, or understanding the implications of non-compliance. If immediate compliance is not feasible, the professional decision is to avoid the activity that violates the law, in this instance, driving the vehicle. This proactive approach minimizes risk and upholds ethical and legal standards. Question 14. Strategic planning requires a driver applicant in Virginia to demonstrate proficiency in navigating intersections. During a road test, an applicant approaches an intersection controlled by a flashing red traffic signal. What is the most appropriate action according to the Virginia Motor Vehicle Code? Option A. Treat the flashing red signal as a stop sign, coming to a complete stop before proceeding when it is safe to do so. Option B. Proceed through the intersection cautiously without stopping, as a flashing red signal indicates a reduced speed requirement. Option C. Stop only if another vehicle is approaching the intersection, otherwise, proceed without stopping. Option D. Treat the flashing red signal as a yield sign, slowing down and proceeding if the way is clear. The correct answer is A. Treat the flashing red signal as a stop sign, coming to a complete stop before proceeding when it is safe to do so. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only knowledge of Virginia's traffic laws, but also the ability to apply them in a practical, real-world context. The examiner must assess the applicant's judgment and adherence to safety protocols, which are paramount for public safety on Virginia roadways. Misinterpreting or disregarding traffic signals, signs, or the right-of-way can lead to dangerous situations, accidents, and violations of the Virginia Motor Vehicle Code. Careful judgment is required to ensure the applicant can operate a vehicle safely and responsibly within the established legal framework. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the applicant demonstrating a thorough understanding and consistent application of the Virginia Motor Vehicle Code, specifically regarding traffic control devices and right-of-way rules. This includes observing and obeying all traffic signals, signs, and pavement markings, and yielding the right-of-way to other vehicles and pedestrians as dictated by Virginia law. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the primary objective of the Virginia DMV driver's test: to ensure that licensed drivers are competent and safe operators who will not endanger themselves or others on public roads, thereby upholding the public safety mandate of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Incorrect approach is analysis. Failing to stop completely at a red traffic signal, even if no other traffic is present, is a direct violation of Virginia traffic laws and demonstrates a disregard for traffic control devices, increasing the risk of a collision. Proceeding through a stop sign without ensuring the intersection is clear and yielding to any approaching traffic or pedestrians violates the right-of-way rules established by the Virginia Motor Vehicle Code and creates a hazardous situation. Making a turn without signaling the intended direction of travel is a violation of Virginia law and can confuse other road users, potentially leading to accidents. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this assessment by prioritizing safety and adherence to all applicable Virginia traffic laws and regulations. This involves a systematic approach. First, understanding the specific requirements of the Virginia Motor Vehicle Code related to the maneuver being tested. Second, observing all traffic control devices and signs meticulously. Third, applying the correct right-of-way principles. And finally, executing the maneuver smoothly and safely. If unsure about any aspect of the law or the correct procedure, it is always best to err on the side of caution and seek clarification, or perform the action in the safest possible manner, even if it means a slightly longer or more deliberate execution. Question 15. The monitoring system demonstrates that a vehicle operating in Virginia has an expired safety inspection sticker, and a Virginia State Police officer is observed in the immediate vicinity. Which of the following actions best ensures compliance with Virginia's motor vehicle regulations? Option A. Attempt to remove or alter the expired inspection sticker to make it appear current. Option B. Engage the law enforcement officer in a discussion about the perceived leniency of the inspection requirements. Option C. Safely pull over the vehicle to the side of the road and arrange for the required safety inspection as soon as possible. Option D. Continue driving to the intended destination, hoping to avoid detection by the law enforcement officer. The correct answer is C. Safely pull over the vehicle to the side of the road and arrange for the required safety inspection as soon as possible. Explanation: the monitoring system demonstrates a potential lapse in adherence to Virginia's traffic laws, specifically concerning the operation of a vehicle with an expired inspection sticker. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate and accurate judgment regarding the legality of continuing to operate a vehicle under such circumstances, balancing the driver's immediate needs with the imperative to comply with state regulations. The driver's awareness of the expired sticker, coupled with the proximity to a law enforcement officer, heightens the urgency for a correct decision. The best professional approach involves immediately ceasing operation of the vehicle in a safe manner and arranging for the required inspection. This is correct because Virginia Code Section 46-2-1163 mandates that every motor vehicle registered in the Commonwealth shall be subject to a safety inspection and must display a valid inspection certificate. Operating a vehicle with an expired sticker is a violation of this law. By pulling over safely and addressing the issue, the driver avoids further violations and demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach involves continuing to drive, hoping to reach a destination before being stopped. This is incorrect because it constitutes a direct violation of Virginia Code Section 46-2-1163, increasing the likelihood of a traffic citation and potential penalties. The presence of a law enforcement officer nearby makes this approach particularly risky and demonstrates a disregard for the law. Another incorrect approach involves attempting to obscure or alter the expired inspection sticker. This is incorrect as it constitutes a fraudulent act and a violation of Virginia's motor vehicle laws, potentially leading to more severe penalties than simply having an expired sticker. It undermines the integrity of the inspection system and demonstrates a clear intent to deceive. A further incorrect approach involves arguing with the law enforcement officer about the necessity of the inspection. While drivers have the right to understand the law, engaging in an argument when clearly in violation of a statute like Section 46-2-1163 is unproductive and can escalate the situation. The focus should be on rectifying the violation, not disputing its existence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and adhering to relevant statutes. When faced with a potential violation, the immediate step should be to assess the situation, identify the specific regulation at play, in this case, Virginia's vehicle inspection requirements, and take the most compliant course of action, which often involves ceasing the non-compliant activity and seeking to rectify it. Question 16. During the evaluation of a driver's knowledge of Virginia traffic laws, the examiner describes a scenario where a driver approaches an uncontrolled intersection at the same time as another vehicle. Both drivers are facing a stop sign, but there are no other traffic control devices. What is the correct procedure for the driver to follow to ensure compliance with Virginia's traffic regulations? Option A. Proceed through the intersection, assuming the other vehicle will yield. Option B. Proceed through the intersection without yielding to any other vehicle. Option C. Yield to the vehicle that arrived at the intersection first. Option D. Proceed through the intersection without yielding as the other vehicle is smaller. The correct answer is C. Yield to the vehicle that arrived at the intersection first. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of Virginia's traffic laws regarding yielding the right-of-way, specifically at an uncontrolled intersection. Misinterpreting these rules can lead to dangerous situations and potential accidents, making accurate application of the law critical for public safety. The challenge lies in applying the abstract rule to a concrete, albeit described, situation. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves yielding to the vehicle that arrived at the intersection first. Virginia law, as outlined in the Virginia Driver's Manual, dictates that at an uncontrolled intersection, where there are no signs or signals, the driver who arrives first has the right-of-way. This principle prioritizes predictable traffic flow and reduces the likelihood of collisions by establishing a clear order of precedence. Adhering to this rule ensures compliance with Virginia's traffic regulations and promotes safe driving practices. Incorrect approach is analysis. Approaching the intersection and proceeding without yielding to any other vehicle is incorrect because it disregards the fundamental rule of right-of-way at uncontrolled intersections, potentially creating a hazardous situation and violating Virginia traffic law. Proceeding based solely on the assumption that the other vehicle will yield is incorrect, as it relies on the other driver's compliance rather than proactively adhering to established traffic rules, which is a failure of responsible driving and regulatory compliance. Assuming the other vehicle is smaller or less powerful, and therefore should yield, is incorrect and demonstrates a dangerous and illegal disregard for the established rules of the road. Vehicle size or perceived power has no bearing on right-of-way in Virginia. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always prioritize adherence to established traffic laws and safety regulations. When faced with a situation involving right-of-way, the decision-making process should begin with identifying the type of intersection, and then applying the specific rules governing that intersection as defined by Virginia law. If there is any ambiguity or potential for conflict, the safest course of action is always to yield. This proactive approach, grounded in regulatory compliance and a commitment to safety, is paramount. Question 17. What factors determine a driver's responsibility when making a left turn at an unmarked intersection in Virginia, and what is the safest course of action when an oncoming vehicle is approaching? Option A. The driver can proceed if they have already entered the intersection. Option B. The driver can proceed if they believe the oncoming vehicle will slow down. Option C. The driver must yield the right-of-way to all oncoming traffic until it is safe to complete the turn. Option D. The driver can proceed if they make eye contact with the oncoming driver. Correct answer is C. The driver must yield the right-of-way to all oncoming traffic until it is safe to complete the turn. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to interpret and apply Virginia's traffic laws in a dynamic and potentially hazardous situation. The driver must prioritize safety and legal compliance over personal convenience or assumptions, demonstrating a nuanced understanding of right-of-way rules and defensive driving principles. Careful judgment is required to assess the actions of other road users and to make a safe and legal decision. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves yielding the right-of-way to the oncoming vehicle. This is correct because Virginia law, specifically under Section 46, 2-804, generally requires drivers to yield to oncoming traffic when making a left turn. The primary duty of a driver turning left is to do so safely and without interfering with oncoming traffic. This approach prioritizes the safety of all road users and adheres strictly to the established traffic regulations designed to prevent collisions. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding with the turn while the oncoming vehicle is still approaching and has not yielded is incorrect. This directly violates Virginia's left turn statutes and creates an immediate collision hazard. It demonstrates a failure to understand or apply fundamental right-of-way rules, prioritizing personal expediency over legal and safety obligations. Attempting to signal the oncoming driver to proceed is also incorrect. While often done informally, it is not a legally recognized method of transferring right-of-way and can lead to misinterpretation and dangerous situations. The responsibility to yield remains with the driver making the left turn, regardless of perceived signals from others. Stopping in the intersection and waiting indefinitely without a clear path to complete the turn is inefficient and can also create a hazard by blocking traffic. While waiting is necessary, the driver must actively assess when it is safe and legal to proceed, rather than passively remaining in a potentially obstructive position. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of Virginia's traffic laws, particularly those pertaining to turns and right-of-way. In any situation involving potential conflict with other vehicles, the default professional approach is to err on the side of caution and prioritize yielding. This involves actively scanning the environment, anticipating the actions of others, and making decisions that are both legally compliant and maximize safety for all involved. When in doubt, waiting for a clear and unambiguous opportunity to proceed is always the safest and most professional course of action. Question 18. Strategic planning requires a new resident in Virginia to obtain a driver's license. Which approach best ensures compliance with Virginia's traffic laws and safe driving practices? Option A. Thoroughly study the official Virginia Driver's Manual and successfully pass all required Virginia DMV knowledge and vision tests. Option B. Rely on informal driving knowledge gained from friends and family who are licensed drivers in Virginia. Option C. Assume that prior driving experience in another state negates the need for Virginia's specific licensing examinations. Option D. Attempt to obtain a license by only reviewing general driving principles without consulting the specific Virginia driver's manual. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly study the official Virginia driver's manual and successfully pass all required Virginia DMV knowledge and vision tests. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal and safety requirements mandated by the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV. A new resident must demonstrate their understanding of Virginia's traffic laws and safe driving practices. Failure to comply with these regulations can lead to penalties, including the inability to obtain a valid license, and more importantly, compromise public safety on Virginia's roadways. Careful judgment is required to ensure all legal prerequisites are met before operating a vehicle. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice is to diligently study the official Virginia driver's manual and complete all required steps for obtaining a Virginia driver's license, including passing the knowledge and vision tests. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the regulatory framework established by the Virginia DMV. Virginia Code Section 46(2-323) mandates that any person driving a motor vehicle in the Commonwealth must be licensed, and obtaining such a license requires demonstrating knowledge of traffic laws and safe driving practices through examinations. This ensures that all drivers on Virginia roads meet a minimum standard of competence and awareness, thereby promoting public safety. Incorrect approach is analysis. Pursuing a driver's license without thoroughly reviewing the Virginia driver's manual and understanding its contents is an ethically unacceptable approach. This fails to meet the spirit and letter of Virginia Code Section 46(2-323), which presumes a driver's knowledge of traffic laws. It also creates a significant risk to public safety by potentially allowing an uninformed individual to operate a vehicle. Attempting to obtain a driver's license by only relying on informal advice from friends or family without consulting the official Virginia driver's manual is also professionally unacceptable. This approach bypasses the structured learning and assessment process designed by the Virginia DMV to ensure driver competency. It is a direct violation of the regulatory requirement to demonstrate knowledge of Virginia's specific traffic laws and regulations, as outlined in the official manual. Seeking to bypass the knowledge test by claiming prior driving experience from another state without completing the necessary Virginia DMV procedures for transferring or obtaining a new license is a regulatory failure. While prior experience is valuable, Virginia law requires all new residents to meet its specific licensing requirements, which include passing the required tests, as per Virginia Code Section 46(2-323). This approach disregards the state's authority to set its own standards for driver licensing. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach obtaining a Virginia driver's license by prioritizing regulatory compliance and public safety. This involves a systematic process. First, obtaining and thoroughly studying the official Virginia driver's manual. Second, practicing with sample tests if available. Third, scheduling and successfully completing the required knowledge and vision tests at a Virginia DMV service center. This methodical approach ensures all legal obligations are met and contributes to safer roads for everyone in the Commonwealth. Question 19. The control framework reveals that a driver in Virginia is approaching a section of highway with a posted speed limit of 65 mph. However, it is currently raining heavily, and the road surface is wet and slick, significantly reducing visibility and traction. Which of the following actions best demonstrates compliance with Virginia's traffic laws and safe driving practices? Option A. Continue at the posted speed limit of 65 mph, as the law only requires speed reduction for clearly marked construction zones or school zones. Option B. Maintain the posted speed limit of 65 mph, assuming it is safe as long as other drivers are doing so. Option C. Reduce speed to a level that is safe for the current wet and low visibility conditions, even if it is significantly below the posted speed limit. Option D. Increase speed slightly to try and outrun the rain and improve visibility. The correct answer is C. Reduce speed to a level that is safe for the current wet and low visibility conditions, even if it is significantly below the posted speed limit. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario where a driver's understanding of Virginia's traffic laws is being tested, specifically concerning the safe operation of a vehicle in varying conditions. This scenario is professionally challenging because a driver's adherence to traffic laws directly impacts public safety and the legal operation of a motor vehicle. Misinterpreting or disregarding these regulations can lead to accidents, citations, and a loss of driving privileges. Careful judgment is required to apply the correct principles of safe driving and legal compliance in real-world situations. The correct approach involves demonstrating a comprehensive understanding of Virginia's traffic laws, particularly those pertaining to speed limits and safe driving practices in adverse weather. This includes recognizing that posted speed limits are maximums for ideal conditions, and that drivers have a legal and ethical obligation to reduce speed when visibility is poor, roads are wet or icy, or other hazardous conditions exist. This aligns with Virginia Code Section 46(2-803), which mandates that drivers operate their vehicles at a speed that is reasonable and prudent under the existing conditions, rather than simply adhering to the posted limit. This approach prioritizes safety and legal compliance by acknowledging the dynamic nature of driving conditions and the driver's responsibility to adapt. An incorrect approach would be to assume that the posted speed limit is always the safe and legal speed, regardless of road conditions. This fails to account for the driver's duty to exercise caution and reduce speed when hazards are present, as outlined in Virginia law. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize reaching a destination quickly over ensuring safety, leading to excessive speed in adverse conditions. This demonstrates a disregard for the law and the safety of other road users. Finally, an approach that relies solely on the speed of other vehicles as a guide, rather than on an independent assessment of safe speed based on conditions and legal requirements, is also flawed. This can lead to drivers inadvertently matching the speed of others who may also be driving unsafely. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of applicable laws and regulations. This is followed by an assessment of the current environmental conditions and potential hazards. The driver must then determine a speed that is both legally permissible and safe under those specific circumstances, prioritizing the safety of themselves and others. This involves proactive risk assessment and a commitment to responsible driving. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that a driver in Virginia is traveling at 55 miles per hour on a dry, level road. Using the approximate formula for total stopping distance in feet, which is total stopping distance equals speed in mph/10, asterisk speed in mph/10, plus speed in mph. What is the calculated total stopping distance for this vehicle? Option A, 220 feet. Option B, 302.5 feet. Option C, 275 feet. Option D, 330 feet. The correct answer is D, 330 feet. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for new drivers in Virginia, accurately calculating the required stopping distance based on speed, which is crucial for safe driving and compliance with Virginia traffic laws. The professional challenge lies in applying a learned formula under pressure and ensuring the calculation is precise enough to inform safe driving decisions, particularly when encountering unexpected hazards. Miscalculation can lead to accidents, violations, and a failure to meet the standards expected of a licensed driver. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves correctly applying the standard formula for calculating total stopping distance, which includes both reaction distance and braking distance. In Virginia, the approximate formula for total stopping distance in feet is often presented as total stopping distance equals speed in mph/10, asterisk speed in mph/10, plus speed in mph. This formula accounts for the time it takes a driver to perceive a hazard and reaction distance, and the distance the vehicle travels while the brakes are applied, braking distance. Using this formula directly and accurately ensures the driver has a realistic understanding of the space needed to stop safely. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to only consider the braking distance and ignore the reaction distance. This is a significant regulatory failure because Virginia traffic laws implicitly require drivers to be able to stop safely, which includes accounting for the time it takes to react to a hazard. Ignoring reaction distance underestimates the actual stopping distance, leading to unsafe following distances and an increased risk of collision. Another incorrect approach would be to use a simplified or arbitrary estimation of stopping distance that does not adhere to established formulas or guidelines. For example, assuming a fixed stopping distance regardless of speed is a dangerous oversimplification. This fails to comply with the principle of adjusting driving behavior to conditions, including speed, which is a fundamental aspect of safe driving and implicitly required by Virginia's traffic regulations. A further incorrect approach would be to misapply the formula by incorrectly performing the mathematical operations. For instance, adding the speed to the braking distance calculation before multiplying, or incorrectly squaring the speed term. Such mathematical errors would result in an inaccurate stopping distance, leading to a false sense of security or unnecessary caution, both of which can compromise safety and compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always prioritize accuracy and adherence to established guidelines when performing calculations related to safety. In the context of driving, this means understanding and correctly applying the formulas provided by the Virginia DMV for calculating stopping distances. When faced with a calculation, the professional decision-making process involves 1. Identifying the relevant formula or guideline. 2. Ensuring all input variables are correct. 3. Performing the calculation meticulously. And 4. Using the result to inform safe driving practices, such as maintaining appropriate following distances and adjusting speed for conditions.